now my pleasure to turn it over to our Chief Curator and Director, Dr. Nagaraj Paturi. Over to you, sir.
Namaste. Thank you, Arvind ji. Thank you, Meg ji. There are various topics that we are choosing for this new initiative of us in the name of symposium, where selected speakers are giving talks, expert speakers are giving talks on specialized topics, scholarly topics. And this particular symposium is being organized by one of the wings of Indica called Center for Bharatiya Languages, which is being led by Sri Meg Kalyana Sundaramji. And this initiative of a symposium on Vyākaraṇa has been, as Sri Megji was mentioning, it is the brainchild of Sri Arvind V. IRG. Professor Korada Subramaniamji, Mahamahopadhyaya, Professor Korada Subramaniamji is a favorite topic, Vyākaraṇa, Akyapadiya, is chosen today, and this is his day. Actually, that is why Sri Megji had to stop him at some point. It is a flow, an incessant Ganga Pravaha of knowledge in his favorite area that was happening. And we have all these other scholars like Soumya Krishnanji, from a very long time engaged in teaching Vyākaraṇa, Sanskrit, and Jayaramanji engaged in teaching yoga and yoga texts, and he is the leading person for our own textual research in yoga. And we have our own Sharada Narayananji, who is also from the teaching area. She is teaching at a department of Natya, but her background is in Vakyapadiyam and Alankara Shastra and other areas. She has written books and Mimamsa also. But we have this breed of Sri Megji, Sri Arvindji, and others who are entering into this area of academic research in Shastras and other things with a corporate background. That's what actually is quite assuring, quite promising, and creates a great hope for the future of Indic studies in this country. There was an article in the Hindu, typically a leftist approach newspaper, where the writer was weeping that this is happening because they thought that the university Sanskrit scholarship was not able to cater to the modern needs, and they were happy about it. But this unexpected development that the corporate background scholars are entering into Indic studies, particularly Shastra areas, is surprising and shocking to them. And they were expressing that agony on their side that this was happening. And these people with their scientific background, because they went there from areas like engineering and science and technology, they have a very logical and rational thinking background, and they are contributing to these areas. So Sri Arvind ji is coming from that background. He has been contributing to our conferences from that perspective. They're entering into Shastras, and their curiosity and enthusiasm in the Shastras is quite useful, promising, and admirable. Coming to my own person, among many other things, Vyākaraṇa is my favorite field also. Actually, when something happens in this field, I start thinking, how did it happen without my knowledge? Vyākaraṇa? And something happens, and okay, it's good that youngsters are taking up this topic with their own initiative. You cannot always keep doing things where you think you are good at. So it's always better the next generation takes it up and takes it forward. Coming to the various topics that are covered today, Vyākaraṇa as a meta discipline was the title actually. Let's not go with the actual title, whether the title has been properly covered or not. For example, if we come to Satyan Sharmaji's talk, which is at the end, it is actually talking about the accessibility of Vyākaraṇa. Why accessibility of Vyākaraṇa and meta discipline? Unless it is a meta discipline, why it should have access to all the people? That is the logic behind it. Otherwise, the actual paper is not talking about the meta links of Vyākaraṇa to the other shastras or any other thing, but it's a very, very important historical study, documented, well-referenced study of how Vyākarana was a shastra which had access to all the communities. And starting with Arvind Ayarji's introductory talk this morning, he started with the difference between grammar and Vyakarana. My research dissertation on Vakyapadiyam in 87, I had a chapter, I had a section called Grammars to Vyakarana, explaining how in the history of ideas, Western society, through general linguistics that developed after philology, comparative linguistics, historical linguistics, all these were already happening, and general linguistics was developing. Bloomfield and Saussure were the people who were giving in almost around the same time, 1928. Language by Bloomfield was being published. So that time when general linguistics was emerging, they were starting to think in terms of language analysis, linguistics, as a methodology, as a method of analyzing language. But by the time Vyakarana was emerging in India millennia ago, already the word Vyakarana is not grammar. For Western society, for the international society, it is only from the ancient Greek grammar that they evolved up to linguistics in 1928, which is analysis of language. Grammar was not that. Grammar, the Greek grammar was called techne grammatike, and the word grammatike comes from the Greek root graphein, and that root means to write. So techne grammatike literally means techniques of writing. So it was almost in our terminology, in the Shastra, Sanskrit Shastra terminology, the Greek techne grammatike was a Kavishiksha grantha, and that too focusing on how to write. And our Kavishiksha granthas were focusing, some of the Lakshana granthas were called Kavishiksha granthas. And these Kavishiksha granthas, what they were focusing, like Alankara Shastra, Chandas, and other portions, they were not covered in Techne Grammatike. But you have other books, like the book by Cicero called Rhetoric, which was not actually meant for poetry analysis. It was meant for oratory analysis, public speech analysis. But it covered what we call alankaras, figures of speech in that book. So from all such background in the Greek classical background of the European society, it is only in the 20th century that they started coming to Vyakarana. What we call Vyakarana, they started doing now in 20th century. What is Vyakarana? Vivichya pradarshante anena shabdaha iti Vyakarana. It has got V, the prefix, and A, the prefix, and Kri, the dhatu, the verb. So we are and kri is to do, a is well, and b is to split. So to split well, to do the splitting well. And in Mahabhashya, Tashpashamika, you have this definition, etymological definition, where it is said that Vyakriyante Vivichya Pradarsyante Anaya Shabdaha. So this kind of splitting and showing happened only during the time of philology and during the time of linguistics, general linguistics emerging. So they were moving from their technogrammatic level to the Vyākaraṇa level. That's what I was writing in my research dissertation. So that was a very good point that grammars, technogrammatic writing techniques is different from analysis, vivicha pradarshana in grammar. And as we have seen in Professor Korada Subramaniam Mahapadhyay, Professor Korada Subramaniam's talk, he was mentioning his talk in FLU, where he mentioned how Vyākaraṇa is a Shastra which is applicable not just to Sanskrit, it is applicable to all the languages of the world. That is what they learned during the 19th century when European scholars were interested in studying comparison of their own languages to Sanskrit, and the whole idea of Indo-European language family and all that emerged. They were learning from the language that they were analyzing, the sources in that language. They were learning the methodology of analysis also. So Sanskrit was not just one of the languages that they were analyzing. It was the language in which the source books of methodological techniques were available for them to analyze their own languages also. And this ability of the Shastra called Vyākaraṇa to be applicable to the other languages of the world, like English, was demonstrated by Professor Korada Subramaniam Garu during his talk at FLU and today also. And he was also, as a Sarvadarshana scholar, Professor Korada, was showing how other Shastras also, like Mimamsa, Nyaya, they have parallels with Vyākaraṇa, and all of them, each of them is a meta science. Today, our bridegroom is Vyākaraṇa, and we are focusing all our attention on Vyākaraṇa. In some other symposium, we can have our Mimamsa as our bridegroom, and all the focus, all the attention will be on Mimamsa, and we can show how that is a meta discipline, and all these are connected. And in Vakyapadiyam, Bhartrhari is very well aware of this, and he is very clearly saying, Kiyadva Shakyamunnetum Swatarkam Anudhavata. If you are following only your logic, how much knowledge can you acquire? Prajna Vivekam Labhate Bhinnair Agama Darshanaihi. This multidisciplinarity is very clearly articulated only in Vyākarana Darshana by Bhartrhari. He is saying that Bhinnair Agama Darshanaihi, only with multiple Shastras, that prajna vivekam labhate, your intellect gets the discerning ability, distinguishing ability, vivekam labhate, he is saying. And that you can see when you go into Vakyapadiyam, there is so much of interconnectivity. He is very clear about it. All the Padakanda chapters have the categories drawn from Nyaya, and you have in Vakyakanda words drawn from Mimamsa, and they are given completely a different Vyakaranic interpretation. And you have Vedanta in the Brahmakanda, but a completely different Shabda Brahma approach given. One very interesting classification of sciences, classification of Shastras, that is to be paid attention, and Dr. Jayaramanji has very clearly mentioned that in the beginning of his talk, is this trilogy this trinity of Shastras, Yoga, Vyākaraṇa, and Ayurveda. It is also mentioned in Vakyapadiya. He there says, Chikitsa Adhyatma Lakshana Shastraihi. Chikitsa Shastra is Ayurveda, Lakshana Shastra, and Adhyatma Shastra is Yoga. Kaya Vang Manasamalaha ye samavastitaha tesham vidhutayaha. All those are cleaned. So, actually, all over the world, now it has become such a routine to speak about word, deed, and creed. Kaya, Vaka, Manasa. And all the Hindus in their puja, they mention this Kaya, Vacha, Manasa, Kayena, Vacha, all this. So these words are very well known, popular only, but those are made into a trilogy, trinity of sciences. Trikarana Shuddhi, we talk, and these three Karanas, Kaya, Vak, and Manas, they are cleaned through these three sciences. Kaya Shuddhi happens through Ayurveda, Manasa Shuddhi happens through Yoga, and it is Vak Shuddhi that happens through Vyākaraṇa. And that is Shabda Yoga, and among audience we have our Shabda Yoga fan, great enthusiast of Shabda Yoga, B.V.K. Shastri Garu, also sitting among the audience today. And this is a yoga. Vyākaraṇa is a yoga. And in Vakyapadiyam, that is what it is mentioned. Vyākaraṇa is a upaya. It's an upaya for the upeya called moksha. It is mentioned that way. And to that level, it is being taken. According to Bhartrihari, it was done by Vyadi himself in Sangraha. And that was preserved through Mahabhashya and is just compiling those ideas back again, is what is being mentioned there. Dr. Jayaramanji was focusing more on how this Vyākarana as a Shabda Shastra is useful in studying the Shastra texts of yoga and how it helps in avoiding misinterpretations that are happening now. So he is cautioning us. He has been cautioning us in other seminars and symposiums and conferences also, how those who are not trained in Vyakarana have completely misinterpreted Yoga Shastra books. But the other side of usefulness of Vyakarana as a darshana is that it is very well connected with yoga, that the Manasa Shuddhi that is given by yoga is complemented by Vak Shuddhi through Vyakarana, just the way Ayurveda gives the Sharira Shuddhi. And when our own Dr. Sharda Narayananji was talking about usefulness of Vyakarana for poetry study, she was trying to be independent of the existing Alankara Shastra texts that have been using Vyakarana in the analysis of poetry. She was trying to, on her own, put the Vyakarana, how Vyakarana is useful in analyzing poetry with her own examples from various poetic texts. But this approach of using Vyakarana or usefulness application of Vyakarana to Alankara Shastra was happening at two levels in Alankara Shastra itself, in the study of poetry itself. At one level, books like Vakrokti Jivitam, Auchitya Vichara Charcha, whenever they talked about, say, for example, Auchityam, they were talking about Auchitya at the level of Karaka, Auchitya at the level of Pratyaya, Auchitya at the level of Upasarga, and Auchitya at the level of Varna. So they were taking categories from Vyakarana and applying Auchitya to that. And the beautiful book Vakrokti Jivitam by Kuntaka is actually beautifully building the levels of Vakrokti from Varna, then the broader Pada, then the broader Vakya, then the broader Prakarana and the broadest Prabandha. And there he is talking about Varna Vinyasa Vakrata, the Varna level and Pada level, Pada Purvartha and Pada Parartha Vakrata. And at the Vakya level, he is already talking about Vakya Vaichitya Vakrata. So the Arthalankaras like Upama, which Sharda Narayananji was giving as an example, all the Arthalankaras are actually Vakya Vaichitya examples only. He, with his own small examples, he shows how Vakya Vaichitya is actually, it's a grammatical analysis. You're talking about Pada Purvartha, Pada Parartha, Upasarga, and Pratyaya parts in Pada Purvartha and Pada Parartha, and the in a Samasa, Purva Pada and Uttara Pada, and in Varnas also, how Varna Vinyasa has to be analyzed. All that is being shown there in Vakrokti Jivita. That's one kind of application of Vyākaraṇa that was already happening. And people like Bhamaha and others, they were already talking about the usefulness of Vyākarana by saying that yadi shabdahvayam jyotirāsamsāram dīpyate atha shishtānam api sarvadha. All these words, they were actually hinting at Vyākarana. But at a different level, at a philosophical level, we have Dhvanyaloka, for example, is an application of Skota, the Vyakarana Darshana, and with that application, he was bringing the entire Drishyakavya oriented discussion of rasa to a Shravyakavya oriented discussion. So from a visible poetry analysis to an audible poetry analysis to a verbal analysis, he was bringing. So he was using Vyakarana for bringing a completely new application from the analysis of visible to the audible, verbal part. And that was being continued by Abhinav Gupta in his Lochana. And there again, because already Abhinav Gupta was inheriting the Vyakarana Darshana's application into Tantra in the form of what today is being called as Kashmir Shaiva Tantra. He was applying that tantric philosophical import also into Lochana, Abhinava Bharati, and other books of him. And there he is integrating this Vyakarana analysis at a philosophical level, at a theoretical level, to the analysis of poetry, audible poetry in Lochana, and visible poetry called Natya in Natya Shastra. And we have seen all these applications that are being covered by various scholars today. So this applicability of Vyakarana to various Shastras need not be considered to be limited to just the Shastras that are mentioned. For example, the topic of Dharma Shastra that was taken up by Satyan Sharma-ji, though he was covering the accessibility aspect only in his talk, the interpretation of Dharma Shastras also requires a lot of Vyakarana knowledge. All the Dharma Shastra scholars that were consulted by the king in the form of Pradvivakas and Adhikaranikas. These were judicial posts in the king's court. Adhikaranika and Pradvivaka were the judicial officers. They were expected to be very good in Vyakarana, at least at the level of a basic understanding of Vyakarana. By the time Adhikaranikas and Pradvivakas were existing, Bhattoji Dikshita was also not there. So probably there were smaller, made easy methods of learning Vyakarana at that time, if not the entire Ashtadhyayi, some summarized versions of Ashtadhyayi like that of Dharmakirti or something else was being given, but these judicial officers were learning Vyakarana from that perspective. Is documented in the books where we talk about them. And the beautiful talk by Satyan Sharma ji was mentioning the accessibility of Vyākaraṇa to all. My own anecdotal experience is when Professor Nataraja Ramakrishna, the great Natya Shastra scholar, researcher, Natyacharya, uh, he was working on the Devadasi system. He brought some surviving Devadasis from the Mandapeta and other areas of Godavari districts to Hyderabad to an auditorium, and they were all being shown on the stage to the audience that these are the surviving uh, respected Devadasis on the stage. And on the stage, one scholar, one Shastra scholar, was mentioning some shloka, reciting some shloka. But there was a difference of opinion in the mind of one of the Devadasis about a particular patha, particular version that this Shastra scholar was reciting. And she immediately rose her hand and said, Ayya, please stop. The version that I heard for this shloka is different. Let me recite that. And she recited, and she explained both the pathas using the sutras of Ashtadhyayi, explained the grammar, and said that both the pathas seem to be grammatically correct, but my patha seems to be more traditional and more accurate and more suitable to the context. She explained it using Vyākaraṇa Shastra knowledge. And this Devadasi with such a deep Vyakarana knowledge, probably all those who were sitting Devadasis on the stage, they were equally knowledgeable in Vyakarana. But she had a chance to talk and she talked. And if this is the situation in 20th century, let us imagine how the situation of Devadasis was in the BC, in the early AD. They were so scholarly people. And in the 11th century, the Telugu poet Nannaya, when he describes Vidya Vilasa Goshti, there among the scholarly members of the August audience, he is mentioning Vilasinis also. Vilasini Parivritundayunna, he says. So this community, because this community was studying Natya Shastra, Sangeeta Shastra, and other art-related Shastras, they were all trained in Vyakarana also from millennia in this country. And when Kate Vema Reddy writes Vyākyaṇa to Shakuntala, Vijñāna Shakuntalam, he's quoting Vyakarana immensely. He's a Reddy king. And when Vasantharajiyam is written by another Reddy king, he is also employing Vyakarana immensely. When Krishnadevaraya is writing Amukta Malyada, his expressions indicate that he was a wonderful scholar in Vyakarana. Otherwise, he cannot come up with such beautiful Sanskrit expressions in the Narikela Paka verses of Amukta Malyada. So all these are evidences for Satyan Sharmaji's mention of the accessibility of the Shastra of Vyakarana, not just in the documents, historical documents that they were attending the schools by the British time and all that, but there are books where these Shudra authors were already writing books, and their Vyakarana knowledge was getting reflected in those books. So I think I completed my formality of a recollection and reflection of today's sequence of scholarly, in-depth analytical talks, enlightening talks by different scholars. With this, I express my gladness, happiness to Sri Megji and to Arvind Ayarji. Your generation has to take this initiative forward and keep conducting more such symposiums for the benefit of the contemporary Indian society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Paturi. I think we should do a separate
talk on your 1987 thesis at some point of time, which is very specific to that, because I think that's an interesting nugget you shared amongst all the other synthesis that you did. So keeping an eye on time, I would like to, on behalf of Indica's Center for Bharatiya Languages, thank each and everyone who joined us today for this symposium. I'd like to mention my colleagues Koti ji and Srinivas ji and Amit and everybody else who contributed to making this symposium possible. Of course, I'd be failing if I didn't mention Harikiran Vallamani ji, who's founder of Indica. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody. Thank you so much. Namaste.